Hey there, everyone. This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. And in this video, I want to share some music production tips and techniques that you can use in your projects by recreating the beat we hear in The 90s by Finneas. Let me show you what it sounds like when it's all said and done.
Sometimes I think about the
So excited about this one. There's a lot of cool things that we're going to talk about. Distortion, how to manage the overall volume, get the balance between the kick and the bass just right. So sit through the whole thing and let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, as a quick reminder, aside from just producing content on this channel, I spend a lot of my time mentoring and helping those take their next step with their music production on my platform, beatacademy.com. So if you're serious about wanting to grow as a music producer or wanting to learn how to produce your own music and are looking for the professional guidance to help you do that, then I would strongly recommend you visit beatacademy.com and take advantage of all the resources that I have available for you there and the mentorship opportunities as well. All right, let's go ahead and start with the drums. All right, so the goal isn't to find the exact same patch or preset that the producer or the artist is using. What I want to do is kind of get more or less and understand the how do I achieve that type of sound, right? And so when I'm listening in on the drums, the elements that really stuck out to me at first were the hi-hats, the close and open hi-hats. And they sounded to me like they came from a vintage drum machine, specifically the C78 drum machine. And one thing that could be really beneficial for you as you start to produce your own music is just becoming a good student of sounds, going through a library of vintage drum machines, things that just are staples in drum selections. That way you just become familiar. You go, oh yeah, that's the type of sound I want to go for. So in this case, Ableton Live comes stock with a C78 vintage drum machine. Here's some of the sounds. It's like that old drum box that you would sometimes hear on old organs or old vintage drum machines and things like that. So let's go ahead and double click this clip slot and focus in on our pattern. All right, that's our kick and snare pattern. And now let's go ahead and add the hi-hats. I'm going to start with adding the open hi-hat first. So I'll place that on beat 2, bar 1. And we're going to do that every other beat. Just like that. And so once I have that set up, I can highlight this section here and just duplicate that. So once I have that, we can go ahead and duplicate that amount of time and then have that pattern duplicated throughout the first 4 beats. Now let's go to our close hi-hat and let's go ahead and place, just keep open and leave the section where the open hi-hat is playing. We don't want those two to be playing because they're going to cancel each other out. They're basically going to choke one another out. So we'll just basically placing our close hi-hats where we everywhere else where we don't have our open hi-hat. Now to add a little bit of life, let's go to some of these hi-hats and lower the velocity. You can also just click it and hit the command or command key and just drag and drop the velocity from there as well. So I'm going to just do this a couple times and that will help kind of give a little bit of movement to those hi-hats. Now let's add an EQ on the whole drum kit. And the purpose of this is we're not really using this as the main drums, focusing more on just having that, those hi-hats. They really do help cut through in the mix. So I'm just going to cut a lot of that low end. We want a little bit of the presence of the kick, but we'll let all that low end live for the next layer of drums that we're going to place on top of this. So I've got a nice background layer with the hi-hats and that C78. Now I'm going to put a layer at the forefront here that's going to handle a lot more of the beef and the weight of the drums. I'm going to be using Excellent Audio's XO plugin for this. This is a plugin I've been using a lot recently that really just kind of helps me take a fresh perspective in looking for sounds that I'm looking for, rather than just going to the usual folders or bookmarks, which that can be very helpful. But the way this is laid out, as you can see, this is a visual map of the samples that I've chose the plugin to locate on my hard drive. So I can simply just say, hey, choose, new sample packs or whatever it is that I'm incorporating into my hard drive, my sound library. It'll scan all of them and it will create this color coded map with all the kicks in this red area, snares in blue, and hi-hats and so on. So it makes it really neat because I can just kind of click, drag, come across a sound I like, or if I find a sound and I'm just looking for something quite similar, I can now just kind of scale through the similarity bar down here and choose a sample that I think will be great. What's also very powerful is just a simple search. I'm looking for any samples in this map with the word or phrase 808 in it. So that makes things a lot helpful. And then I can also search by particular, main frequencies. I'm looking for stuff that has a lot more higher end. You can see the map starts to darken and only illuminate the ones that fit the description. Length, I'm looking for samples that are really, really short, or drumminess, meaning, how more percussive or staccato that sound might be. Some sounds might be samples, such as maybe a cello or things like that. So really cool. And you can also just filter out the folders. I only want to find samples that are in specific type of folders because in the back of your mind, that's where that sample lives. It's in this folder. Just browsing that. So really powerful tool. Once I've gotten the sounds that I like that I'm looking for, I'm going to go ahead and just copy the same exact pattern from our first drum layer here. Okay, then what we'll do is just go ahead and group these two and create our nice little summing with our drum bus. So I'll just call this drum bus. And we'll do a little bit of compression here. And then I also want to add some saturation because there's a lot of that grittiness going on in this track. We'll do some compression. I'm going to use Ableton Live's glue compressor for this on the drum bus. So here we go in the audio effects folder, look for glue compressor. And let's just dial back a little bit. We'll set it to 4:1 ratio. Something that I like to do is just dial the threshold way back, hear what the compressor would sound like exaggerated, and then just scale it back because that kind of helps me hear the dramatic change that the compressor is doing. I can be more aware of what that compressor is doing. That's good there. Now let's go ahead into our audio effects. Let's go to Drive and Color and use our Drum Bus plugin. Love this plugin. It's one of my favorite ones to use in Ableton Live. And if you're following along using Logic or any other DAW, definitely revisit some of the videos on my channel that walk you through how to recreate this in your DAW. So start with giving some drive. And let's lower the dry and wet a little bit. Some crunch here. And this transient knob, now if I want it to be a lot shorter and just focus on the initial transient hits of the kick and snare, I'd move this to the left. But the hi-hats get lost. If I want more of the sustain, more accenting of the hi-hats, I'll turn it to the right. So that's a good spot there. We'll give a little bit of that low end beef, increase the decay. So let's go ahead and bypass. And then just a little bit of EQ. And this is going to make sense, knowing ahead of time that I am going to be having the 808 in there. I'm just going to create a little bit of room for that. So now I'm going to be implementing the 808 to this pattern, and this is an 808 instrument that I've created, which you can download absolutely for free. If you click the link below in the description box or visit beatacademy.com/pack, it would be located in there. And simply what this is just an 808 sample and loaded into Ableton Live Simpler. And we're doing some processing to really get a lot of the low end that we want. So I'm using the amp simulator here, set over to the bass mode. believe it or not, depending on the amp simulation you're going to be using, changes the character of the 808 completely. We go to lead. So I like the bass emulation there. It's good. And we're using another drum bus plugin. And the same principles here with the transients. You can get more of the initial punch if I lower the transient knob to the left. If I want more sustain from the low end, I'll maybe move it to the right. So that's just going to be, moving that around to taste when I start to hear everything in context. And so I've got an EQ to shave off that higher end and just focus on the low end. And then we're going to use this compressor here set to sidechain from the XO. And what I'm going to do is set the EQ so that I can just say anything below 160 hertz or below, use that signal to sidechain this compressor. And that'll give a nice relationship between the kick and the low end. Now, as I go back and listen to the reference, the artist Finneas could really have used anything to get the results that we hear there. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but in my brain, I'm thinking, well, how can I create that same type of sound? Or more importantly, how do I capture the same type of attitude that I feel when I hear that part of the song? And so distortion and clipping is going to be a huge part of that soundscape. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using Ableton Live's wavetable. We're going to separate them in layers. We're going to cover our mid. We're going to get that high part and then have a low part. So here is our mid part, and I'm going to use Ableton Live's wavetable. Drag and drop that. And let's set this to sawtooth. Okay, we want a buzzy type of sound. So both oscillators are going to set to sawtooth. And oscillator 2, let's go ahead and drag this down. We're going to detune this oscillator. We get that buzzy type of sound here. And I'm going to shorten the release a little bit and turn the unison on to classic. Now it's a wide sound there, wide chorus. And let's go to the transpose. Let's go a whole octave lower. And maybe just give a little bit resonance and lower the filter frequency a little bit. Now we're still far way off, but I know that what's going to happen is I'm going to be just completely saturating this with distortion, but it could be really helpful to hear it as I go along. So what I'm going to do is just Command G to group this and start placing processing on the group channel. So I'm going to start by saturating this with a little bit of overdrive. So we'll go to our drive and color here, and let's choose our overdrive plugin. And let's put that right on the group. I'll rename this and call it main riff. And let's go ahead and mess with some of these settings here. Yeah, that's going to get a lot of that grit. And now let's go ahead and add an amp simulator right after that. We'll make sure to set the output to dual so we continue to keep that stereo imaging. Let's make sure to always lower the volume, especially as you start to add saturation plugins and overdrives and things like that. It can get pretty wild. So rule number 1, start to lower your output as you start to add more gain so that you don't blow your speakers away. And let's dial the dry and wet a little bit. Let's start with the heavy. We'll start with the heavy simulation, see what that gives us. All right, and let's add a little bit more. We're going to add the erosion. This is going to be focusing more on, so the overdrive is the texture, right? The amp is going to be the overall body of the distortion. The erosion is going to really focus on some of the air and artifacts that we can hear that make it just feel like it's going right up front out of the speaker, jumping out of the speaker. So let's try wide noise. we can add a little bit of EQ here to kind of just take some of this. All right, now let's start to add the other layers to this. So for the high layer, I'm going to use another wavetable here. And this is going to be set, both oscillators are going to set to a sawtooth. We're pretty much using sawtooth all around because it's giving that buzzy type of feel. Lowering the frequency filter just a little bit. Not doing a lot of changes because all the work is being done with distortion on the group. Setting the unison over back to classic and 3 voices, 27%. Let's just focus on the high one. What we're doing is we're holding and sustaining that F all the way through. That can get really annoying, but we've got that layered with our mid. And it's really going to be just a balancing act between the highs or the lows. What do we want more of? I'm going to repeat the same thing here with the low, which is pretty much just following the 808 and playing the bass. So this is another wavetable here. Both oscillators set to sawtooth. I've got the sub-harmonic oscillator on, transposed it an octave lower. And since this is going to be more on the low end, I'm taking some of the high end away with the filter frequency, and I'm removing that low end stuff because I want the 808 to really be the only one pumping that low end energy. And here, what we're doing different is instead of classic or shimmer, in the unison, we're choosing noise. So we're adding noise to this, giving a lot of the amount 4 voices on the unison. That's really going to help give more feedback to that erosion plugin we have on the group. So now let's go ahead and balance these out a little bit. That's a pretty crazy wall of distortion. So what we need to do now is add a gate to the mix so that we can create that rhythmic pattern. And it also helps that distorted wall of sound breathe a little bit. So you get the in-your-face grit of all the distorted elements, and then the gate gives it some kind of rhythmic pattern to let it breathe a little bit, which makes it really cool, unique, which is what I really loved about what Finneas did on this record. So let's go ahead, head over to the group, and let's add a gate plugin. All right, so before we use our gate, I'm using the gate plugin, an audio effect plugin, to create the pattern. We need something that's going to be triggering that gate plugin with that pattern. So here, I basically just loaded an Ableton Live analog plugin. This can be anything that's going to be generating the source. It could be a drum rack with a sound on it. I personally like using the analog or any synthesizer because I can actually shape the amp envelope. I can shape the body. So if I want the signal that's triggering the gate to be short, long, I can do that here. So this gives me a little bit more leadway. So here is the pattern. Now we're not trying to play musically or change the picture. We're just triggering a rhythm. We're creating a rhythm with this analog because that's the pattern that's going to allow the gate to open and close when it hears this signal. So that's the pattern I want to play. So next what I need to do is go into our group, head over to our dynamics folder and choose gate. Drag and drop that there. Now, normally a gate will only let you hear the audio once it passes the threshold. So what we need to do is set the sidechain on and tell the gate to work, open and close when you hear our gate trigger. That's what I've called my analog here, okay? As you can see, the gate works right when the analog is played. So now let's go ahead, mess around with some of the parameters so that we can get the gate to open just right. So let's go ahead and unsolo the gate trigger. Make sure we mute it so we don't hear it. It's just going to be in the muted so that we can use the pattern to trigger the gate. Now let's put the noise floor all the way down and lower the threshold till we start to hear the pattern take place. So by messing around with the attack, hold, and release, you can change the characteristics of how the gate will react to its source. Now I've got the parameters of the gate the way I like it. Let's see what it sounds like with everything else. So that's cool. Really like where it's at. Let's add some of that distortion vocal that we hear leading into this section. So this was just me just talking right into the mic. I did 2 tracks, one with the main and then I harmonized the part.
Sometimes I think about the.
We got the second one here.
Sometimes I think about the.
All right. I grouped them up so we can do some processing. So here we have an EQ to take away some of the low end. And after that, we're going to just use a little bit of compression here
Sometimes I think about the.
and overdrive. So it's all about distortion today. So putting the overdrive directly on these vocals
Sometimes I think about the.
and just messing around with the tone
Sometimes I think about the.
and a little bit of redux here. And this is going to create a little bit of like some stutter with the distortion.
Sometimes I think about the. Sometimes I think about the.
Well, I hope this video has been helpful, encouraging, and inspiring in any way, and that you've picked up a tip or two that you can use in your projects. And as my gift to you for watching this video, I'd love to send you a sample pack that I've put together with construction kits, loops, one-shots, sounds that you can use absolutely free. It's 100% royalty free, so feel free to use them in your projects and share that music with the rest of the world. Also, you can have access to many Ableton Live sessions just as this, where I'm recreating popular songs. And you can use them as helpful tools to help you in your music production. You can access this by visiting beatacademy.com/pack, or just simply click the download link below. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and like this video so that YouTube will make sure that you won't miss out on any upcoming videos that I'll be working on. And once again, if you're serious about wanting to produce your own music, or you're looking for professional guidance to help mentor you in taking your next step, then you definitely want to visit beatacademy.com. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.